And here we are, July 9th, 2024. Just talking to a friend from Germany there. He's in his 70s. Great guy. And his father was actually a prisoner in the Soviet Union. He was in the Wehrmacht after the defeat of the Third Reich. And he developed a great fondness and love for Russians. They said even when the Russians were so poor, if the prison guards had a bit of extra food, they would give it to the German prisoners. He said that the humanity of the people was amazing, even after what Germany had done to Russia in the war. And we were talking about like how people are today. You know, we know how people hate Russians. They don't know why. They've just been made that way by TV, and how basically the generations today are so stupid, and you know they're pumping it. Just colleges are pumping out nothing but idiots. And he's an atheist, actually, to be honest. Well, he's an agnostic now, but when I first met him, he was an atheist. And he even said they're soulless, the young people today. And he said anyone under 40, they all seem soulless. They have no depth of soul, no depth of character. If they're like robots, is what he said. I'm not very good robots. And yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Now, this is not a non sequitur. It does kind of link in. It actually very much does. That your life experiences determines the things that will impact upon it, you know. So, yesterday I was arguing with a guy on the Hocus Focus group, and he was one of these guys who was going on about, like, you know, the Earth is not a spinning ball. You can't. There's never been your photograph taken of the Earth. All that nonsense. And he bet me £2,000, and I won the bet. And he paid me back. Those types always do, and laughing emojis. And so he posted a meme that showed like NASA was founded by occultists, and it was pictures of things like L. Ron Hubbard, who was nothing to do with Nazis and NASA at all, and he was in the U.S. Navy. But they showed like, you know, Crowley, who founded NASA, the usual nonsense stuff, and Parsons. But it made me thinking, like, yeah, there is an awful lot of occultists in space exploration, and space exploration has a very occultic element to it, a very occultic grounding. In the past, it did. And there's lots of reasons for this. It goes down to like the fundamental thing of the wonder of the universe. You know, in ancient times, people stood in, you know, places with no light pollution and looked up at the stars and beheld vistas in the cosmos that we can't even see today, just because of the clarity of the air. And this is why you have the most developed star lore in places like Babylon and Egypt and Greece and India, where there's less cloud cover. There's very little star lore. I don't think there's any star lore in Ireland that survives. I'm sure there was at some point, but it hasn't survived. We have solar and lunar lore, just because of we don't have the cloud cover. It prevents a lot of that, and it's cold outside, usually on clear nights. So it's a lot of environmental and climatic factors play a huge part in that. But I can tell you, one of the first spiritual experiences I ever had in the truest sense was I got a telescope for my birthday. It was like a 2-inch, if even that, a 1 3/4 inch or 2-inch refracting telescope, and it was set up on the balcony in Ballymun, and I pointed it towards the moon, and the shock and awe of seeing the lunar craters in stark clarity, it was almost like I can remember feeling the thump in my heart that, like, oh my God, it's real. The moon really does look like, you know, what they said it does, and it's not just this blue haze, but I could see all the craters clearly, the big craters, and everything else, and it was just, what the hell, you know. And it was like it was an awe-inspiring, an awesome experience. Now, and then I remember having books like the Ladybird Book of the Night Sky, which has beautiful illustrations, and reading the book as a child, and to this day felt very mystical. the beautiful illustrations of the night sky over the English countryside. I can remember, I think there's one picture of like Orion and a badger in the foreground painted in like semi-moonlight. It's just beautiful illustrations. And there was a Patrick Moore book on the constellations that went back to the 1950s that was basically just blue circles that showed you where each constellation would be at certain times of the year. And the whole thing was just wondrous to me, and it was deeply spiritual. So in the old days, scientists would have came to cosmology in that manner, and then when you find out things like eclipses, how the moon is exactly the right size and exactly the right distance from the Earth in order to create a perfect solar eclipse, it cannot be by accident. That cannot be happenstance. That moon is in the position where it is because it's supposed to be there. Now, you could say it was just accidental and all kinds of things, but even the most hardened skeptic scientist would still have to conclude that the moon is very strange. And even the way when the moon rises above the horizon and is gigantic, that can't be explained. They can't explain that. And when I was growing up, they said it was caused by the Earth's atmosphere being like a lens, and that magnifying it. That's nonsense, because the sun doesn't get bigger, and the other bodies don't get bigger when they rise. And the moon has a strange kind of almost translucence about it when it's rising, and it's huge, as if it's almost like a hologram or something. And they basically have to go to quantum science, quantum physics, and use like the observer effect to try and explain that. But they never adequately will, using their own sort of like, materialistic hard science. So the moon is very peculiar, and that in the past, when people did science, especially things like astronomy and then later quantum theory, the strangeness of the universe created a rationalization that moved them towards the occult. Hence why Newton was an occultist, and so are many others. Tycho Brahe was probably one too. And the strangeness of the universe would have them going into the occult and alchemy to seek answers. Now that's one factor. So that's why a factor is like, and there's a lot of things in science, like calculations and so on, and when you wrote them down by hand, it's a very similar to a magical process. For instance, like when the Apollo missions were on the lunar excursion part of the journey, the telemetry was done literally live with a sheet of paper and a slide rule. Literally, calculations, paper thrown in the bin, calculations, trade it back to them, paper thrown in the bin. It's literally done like that. And there was a kind of an element, you think of like the slide rule as a wand, and the sheet of paper as a sigil being written in a pen, and the astronauts are doing the same as well. And in amongst the darkness of space, with the occasional transponder being a beep, beep, an extreme concentration. In fact, I actually believe that the magic played an enormous part in getting the Apollo 13 mission crew home when the service module exploded on the side, whatever caused that. And from the moment the transmission came through, bing, Houston, we have a problem. From that moment on, it was like that was a rite, that was an incantation. And like when you think about the efforts, and there's a fantastic book about it that I read years ago, about what they had to do to get those guys home. But even the way when they got to Earth, they needed to find a way to find the right way to align for their incoming trajectory for coming in through the atmosphere. And so people in certain countries around the world were told to switch off their lights or switch them on at a certain time, so the astronauts could use the lights to guide them towards the angle of the angle of trajectory into the atmosphere. I mean, that's all fucking magic. That's magic. And they survived, and the whole world was like holding its breath if these guys would come back. The only way that the Apollo 13 crew could have got back. Now you say, oh yeah, it was hard science, but there was a huge element of that to it. There was science and magic are very similar in terms of the massive concentration needed to do it. And So when you're involved in experiences like that, it's very difficult not to be an occultist. Now, regarding all the Freemasons in NASA, that's absolutely true. The reason for that is because nearly most of them came out of the U.S. Navy, and within the U.S. Navy, you had things like the Scottish Rite Freemasonry and Apollo Lodge are huge, not only among officers but among regular seamen as well. And they, so you would have had a situation in mission control where all these guys would have been either Scottish Rite or Apollo, right? Nearly all of them would have been in the lodge, right? No, almost every one of them would have served on battleships in World War II. So they would have been in the Pacific arena at Leyte Gulf and the Battle of Midway and, Guadalajara and all these, Iwo Jima, and all these appalling battles of mass carnage that took place in the specific theatre in World War II, where if you weren't seeing, you would have seen people burned alive from Japanese bombs on hitting the deck of your ship, with their skin on, running around with their skulls exposed, and their skulls showing under their face being burnt off, and the ones who survived that jumping into the sea to be eaten by crocodiles or sharks. Is it any wonder they developed a unique bond? By the time all these guys had finished all that, they found themselves in, Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral, involved in getting a man to the moon. These were men that had been through things that you and I will hopefully never see, and they had lived the hero's journey. This is why there's so much mysticism connected to the Apollo mission. That's one of the reasons I'm so drawn to it, and space travel in general. Like even the way, you know, the way Pioneer 11 switched off its telemetry, it gave its last telemetry reading back in 1995 as it moved into interstellar space. What a remarkable thing that is! Like it moved off into another dimension. This kind of thing, and you're filled with that all the time. And same with the quantum physics end of it, like Oppenheimer citing the Bhagavad Gita as the atomic bomb test happened in Los Alamos. I am the destroyer of 1,000 worlds. This kind of thing, and it wasn't just in the West. You had cosmism in the Soviet space exploration world, whereas this belief was that on this planet, on this Earth, spiritual experiences are not possible, but they are in outer space, and so therefore, this is why you had this whole genre of Soviet and Eastern European literature and other things that revolved around the concept of people meeting their dead ancestors in space, or meeting spirits, or having spiritual experiences beyond the domain of the earth. The deeper you went into space, the more the spiritual experiences were attained. And I think that's actually what happened to the Apollo astronauts when they were shocked by that. They got to the moon and they saw shit that they were not expecting to see. And that's that's why I believe humans will never go further than the moon into space, because they'd stop being human or something. There's some kind of weird. It may also be damaging the universe as a whole. Humans are not supposed to leave this planet any great distance, and so even the Soviets had cosmism. That there was a belief that dead ancestors could be contacted through radio telescopes and things like that, or else if you there was I think it wasn't a film Inception. It was made into an awful version with Hollywood version with the original Polish version, Polish Russian version, where the astronaut's wife dies on Earth, but her spirit appears to him in space. This is a very deeply held belief within cosmism within the Soviet Union, and these were all scientists. Russian cosmology and astronautics and rocket technology was way ahead of the Americans. Even at the time of Apollo, they were way ahead. This is one of the reasons the Russians never bothered sending men to the moon. It was because it was basically a vanity project. It achieves nothing. It's just bragging rights. What do you really learn? Nothing. You don't learn a lot. And, that's why it became this gimmick of fellas hitting a golf ball on the moon and stuff like that, just to try and keep TV ratings up because the public lost interest. Meanwhile, the Russians were sending robots to the moon that were gathering soil and then bringing it back to the Earth. They were sending robots and landers on Mars and then on Venus. While, the Apollo things were going on, they were still very far ahead in space travel. And but that was a different time. This is when the military were very heavily involved, and they were all people who came out of World War II. And if you could say von Braun, yeah, von Braun absolutely was a nasty character in the war. I mean, the V weapons project was definitely a result of slave labor in this kind of thing. But he's justified by saying it was wartime and what was happening. But like he was brought in. Was he an occultist? I don't know. You see, a lot of them were also very heavily involved in science fiction movements. This is actually that was the bonding thing between Parsons and von Braun. Von Braun and Parsons got on so well that they were only communicating by mail and phone, was because they're both mad science fiction fans. So that's a magical element of it too as well, like a chaos magic element, that you have these scientific science fiction romances, and they become almost like grimoires or sort of books of meditation in order to bring the real thing into reality. It definitely was that way between von Braun and Parsons. And von Braun, Jack Parsons was was that one time the secretary of the LA sci-fi fan club or something like that, sci-fi books and fan club. And that was even an amazing thing that him and his friend Ed just, whereas children were building rockets in their backyard in Pasadena. And, he wasn't even involved in NASA, didn't exist. He was an off-campus researcher, a rocket fuel researcher working off-campus from Caltech in Aurora, basically a shack in Aurora Seco near Pasadena. And he's a scrubland and we're in LA and area. And there was a very mystical, and we all know about his thing in the Agape Lodge and Thelema and stuff like that. So there was huge crossovers between the occult and space travel, and I think that's one of the reasons it actually worked. They achieved the impossible because they can't do it today. They just, even the way they sent the sigil out on the Voyager 1 spacecraft, that metal disc with the pictures of the man and woman. There was a belief in a sort of a transcendence that existed within space travel in the past. It doesn't exist there now because it's all civilians and they're all like, weirdos, at NASA, and just like they are at CERN and everywhere else, and they're not even interesting people. And they're basically entertainers who go into space, like your man, what's this guy, the guy who sings on the spaceship with the guitar in his hand. It's just basically entertainment. It's not proper. Like the ISS, that's all rubbish. It achieves nothing. And it's just that, again, that's just vanity, putting people pretending it's a fake version of the Starship Enterprise. And the real stuff is interplanetary probes and robots. Things like Pioneer. Well, that's got switched. That's gone now. We've lost that. Well, it's not gone. It's 4 million miles. It's on a 4 million mile journey. Sorry, a 4 million year journey to the nearest star it can get to, in somewhere in the Aquila constellation. And Pioneer, Voyager 1 and 2 are still transmitting, I think. But are you off, Ryder?
Yeah, I'm heading home.
Take care. Good seeing you again, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll beat these bastards in the end.
Absolutely. They will destroy themselves.
They will.
Oh, they destroy the entire planet, then okay, fair enough. Then we all go.
See you, brother. Bye.
See you, Tom.
That was the man I was talking about at the beginning of the video. But he's well awake. But yeah. So there was this is the reality of the things. That there's. It's one of the reasons I'm interested in the occult. You see, one of the reasons there's a visceral reaction from it within the truther movement and the flat earthers and all them is because they're Christians and they think that anything that's not Christianity is automatic devil worship. So, therefore they've now applied anything to do with space exploration as being devil worship. And this is an unfortunate thing because there's a tremendous font of esoteric and psychological and artistic and creative, substance that can be drawn from that. It's like everything else in the world. It's just fallen apart. I was just saying to my mate there, Reiner, earlier on. I says the Western civilization was built on coal, steel, and oil, and that was created with human ingenuity, labor, and food. And now in Europe, in the West, we don't produce oil, steel, coal. There's no ingenuity, and food is chemical shit. And is it any wonder, with a situation like that we have people growing up thinking that the earth is flat and human beings aren't capable of incredible feats like traveling to outer space, traveling to the moon and back, or sending out probes like Pioneer, and this kind of thing. It's a total deterioration. Not only is it really is end of civilization stuff. Could you imagine that? Well, it did happen in the First Great Reset. When the Christians took over the Roman Empire, they didn't take care of the aqueducts. They stopped taking care of the plumbing system, and the cities fell asunder. They were mocking, I'm sure they were mocking the Roman civil engineering projects. There's no way they built that and they let it die. And we're back here again. All these people today that attack the achievements of the West, whether they're in the truth movement who think that the earth is flat and no one ever went into space, or they're in the mainstream movement that they think it was all evil white men, and it was all stolen from Africa and stuff like that. It's the same thing that happened with the arrival of Christianity. The troglodytes are back. It's as simple as that. The knuckle scrapers. It's as simple as that. So that's why, I always say to people, the Great Reset 2 was Christianity Part 2. The first Great Reset was the fall of the Roman Empire. And here we are again, but, as I was saying to my mate Reiner there, we survived the last one, and we'll survive this one. So there's the reason why there's so much occultism involved in science, and space travel in particular, because there was a better class of people back in the past than there is now. Simple as that.